إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن.
Rahim. Alhamdulillah. First of all, it's very interesting that Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence with Benjamin Franklin, originally Locke, they took this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from John Locke. It was a formula that Locke had written. And Locke, in the original formula, said life, liberties, and the pursuit of property. And Jefferson was a philosopher, and he changed that to the pursuit of happiness. What's interesting also is in the original, in Virginia, in their document, it said life, liberty, and the pursuit and the obtaining of happiness. So he took out obtaining. And the reason for that is Jefferson was a student of the classics, and Aristotle argued in his famous book, The Ethics, that happiness could not be determined at any one point in a person's life. That happiness can actually only be discernible at the end of a person's life, after they've lived their full life, whether or not they lived a happy life or a wretched life. And what's interesting from an Islamic perspective is the word happiness in Old English comes from a root word hap, which is luck or fate. And that's why a hapless person is somebody without any luck. The idea of happiness is that your fate is something that you're actually pleased with. It's rida bil qadar. It's being pleased with what Allah or God has decreed for you. That is true happiness. And people are wretched in the world because they reject their circumstances. It doesn't mean they can't change their circumstances, but they're sad about the past. You can't change the past. So to lose your happiness over what's happened in the past is actually not using the intellect correctly. So the pursuit of happiness is, according to Muslim ethicists as well, is the pursuit of a moral and virtuous life that is something that is pleasing. And the word pleasure, which people associate with happiness, comes from the same root of please. And plesur, the original meaning was to please another. So real pleasure is in the service of others. And that's why the happiest of all people, in our belief, is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And no one served people more than the Prophet. His life from the beginning to the end was a life of service. Even before Islam, he was serving. And that's why Khadija, when he said to her what had happened on the Mount of Light, Khadija said, God will never forsake you. You feed the hungry. You take care of the orphan. You help the widow. You take care of those in distress. The proof that she had was his serving other people. So that is the real secret of happiness. And in philosophy it's called the hedonistic principle. That real pleasure, the real hedonism, is the pleasure derived from serving others. And that's why Madoff is a good example of somebody who pursued false happiness. And now he's the most wretched of the wretched. He destroyed his life, he destroyed the life of others, and he's stuck with himself in a lonely cell for 150 years. The opposite of that are those people who serve even the poorest of poor, because everybody can serve. The street sweeper can serve. The poorest of poor can serve. And that's why real happiness, we believe sa'ada is in service. And finally, the Prophet ﷺ, at the root of our religion is the concept of happiness. Because sa'ada is what we are all looking for. And sa'ada, happiness, is the only thing in the world that is an end and not a means. When you ask people, what do you want? Like, I want to be successful. Why? Because I want to make a lot of money. Why? Because I want, it's always something else. But if you ask them, finally, get to the final, they say, because I want to be happy. And then you ask them, why do you want to be happy? There's no reason to be happy. That's an end in itself. And that is indicative of the fact that what we really want is eternal happiness. That's what the human soul is striving for, to be happy eternally. he had a wonderful sense of humor. We have jokes that he told that are still mentioned on mimbars today. He had a court jester, Nu'ayman, who he loved. And Nu'ayman I mean, if he existed today in the Muslim community, they'd chase him out of the masjid. I mean, this is a man who took Maktoum, the blind man, to somebody he had an argument with, and he told him that it was that person, and it was actually Uthman praying. And Maktoum went up and started hitting him. And when Uthman finished his prayer, he said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Oh my God, I thought you were so-and-so." And he said, "Who told you?" He said, "Nu'ayman." And Nu'ayman's there snickering. I mean, if we had a character like that in the Muslim masjids today. But the Prophet not only put up with him, he laughed with him, he smiled with him. One of his names, Imam Suyuti records one of his names, Al-Dhahak, the laughing Prophet. And he smiled, and they could see the molars of his mouth when he really enjoyed. He never, lam yuqahqah, he never boisterously laughed. He didn't make loud sounds, but he would really heartily enjoy a good sense of humor. And so the joy is part of life. And God, the logicians say that the definition of the human is a logical or a rational animal, but his description in logic, according to the Muslims, is hayawanun dahik, a risible animal, or an animal that laughs, that God put us in. Look at this. I mean, this is such a beautiful point in the Quran. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. And he is the one that made you laugh and made you cry. Fakhruddin al-Razi says in his commentary about this, God is pointing out to us, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ, that he is the one that made you laugh. And Fakhruddin al-Razi says the reason that he emphasizes that by saying وَأَنَّهُ to لِلتَوْكِيد, the reason he emphasizes it is because people laugh for different reasons. What one person finds funny, another person doesn't find funny. It's often the cause of wars. So the fact that people laugh at different things is a proof that it's God that makes them laugh. Because if it was some objective thing out in the world that made all of us laugh at the same thing, we could identify it. But we can't identify. People have twisted senses of humor. People laugh at the misfortunes of other people. Schadenfreude, the Germans even have a word for it. So do the Arabs, by the way. Shamata. To find pleasure in the misfortunes of others, which the Prophet hated. So that idea that God makes us laugh and makes us cry. And if you get into theology, you get into some very interesting debates about, whether God has a sense of humor or not. And in dhahak is considered a sifa according to the Athari school, that it's actually an attribute, laughing, but it's obviously not anything anthropomorphic. So whereas the traditional interpretation was it's his ridwan. So our God loves joy because he created us as joyful creatures. And the greatest joy that you can have is in knowledge of God.
So I'm just going to open this question up to whoever would like to answer it. If this is the case, why do we have this difficulty of many stern-faced Muslims? Why do we have something that really disturbed me when I saw, we had Dalia Mogahed, head of the Center for Muslim Studies at Gallup up here, and they released a report in early 2009 that surveyed American Muslims. And some of the dimensions that they measured were psychological dimensions or emotional. And one of the things that struck me immediately was the high reported levels of anger among many of our youth, in fact, Muslim American youth. And I was really struck by that. What was interesting to me was that there was more anger than sadness. And I kind of thought, well, maybe we've somehow given the signal that anger is acceptable in a way that sadness isn't. Sadness maybe shows weakness, and anger shows a kind of strength, so among males in particular it might be acceptable. But what's going on? I mean, what is going on that we don't have enough reported happiness in our community?
Well, one of the things, I know people always say look at root words and things like that. Somebody told me I was like this Greek guy on my big fat Greek wedding or something. But the word anger, the root word of that means pain. It comes from a root word which angst. And we also get anxiety from the same root, which in Arabic is The Quran reminds us that the pursuit of the pleasure of God is actually what we should be happy about. فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Let them be happy about that, and because it's better than the material pursuit that the others are engaged in. And the Quran also says, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرَ. That vying for material goods has you preoccupied until you visit your graves. And so the real happiness is in this pursuit of the pleasure of God. We believe that. But the beauty of pursuing the pleasure of God is that He has made so many venues in the world to pursue His pleasure. There's so many ways, and the secret is in the intention of the human being. Why are you doing what you're doing? If it's a productive, positive thing, and you have the right intention, you are pursuing happiness for the sake of God. And that's what we have to inculcate into our young people, particularly, that they have to follow what they are inclined to follow in productive and positive ways, because that is what God has given them. And this is when societies are great and strong, is when they allow people to flourish. And the actual word eudaimonia in Aristotle's Ethics, which means happiness, also means flourishing. And flourishing, real sa'ada, real flourishing is when the soul is allowed to grow. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. They have had success. And who is happier other than successful people? They have had success, those who cause the soul to flourish and grow. زَكَّاهَا. And purify it through its growth. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And they are failures and obviously sad and unhappy, those who stunt the growth of the soul. The word for learning in our tradition, tarbiyah, is the same from Rabb al-Alameen, the nurturer of the world. God causes things to grow. He caused these flowers to grow, and that is the intention of the Creator for the human soul, to flourish like the flower. But if we stunt the growth by not watering it, by neglecting it with spiritual pursuit, by neglecting it with worship, then the soul dies and dries up, like these flowers will die and dry up when they're not given their water and their sustenance.